Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Foley. I am a student at Palm Beach State College, and this is my presentation on the history of Jupiter, Florida. There is evidence that Jupiter has been inhabited by humans for over 5,000 years, primarily the Hobe and the Hagwa Native Americans. The Hagwa populated South Florida, while the Hobe were a subgroup settled around Jupiter Inlet. They carved cypress trees into canoes and navigated the waterways for trading into the Everglades and up to Lake Okeechobee. Jonathan Dickinson shipwrecked in 1696 off the coast of Jupiter Island, and when he came to shore, he was met by the Hobe Indians. The Hobe and the Hagwa died out in the early 1700s due to European diseases and occupational pressures. Even though these Native Americans are not with us today, their culture still influences us. For example, that's how the town Hobe Sound got its name, from the Hobe, and also Jupiter got its name from the Hobe. That one is a little bit more difficult to explain. So to the Spanish settlers, Hobe sounded like the word Jove, which means God of the sun, and then God of the sun in English translates to Jupiter. The Seminole Wars were fought in the 1800s. On January 15th, 1838, the first battle of the Loxahatchee was fought. The U.S. retreated. Days later, reinforcements were brought by both sides. The day after the second battle of the Loxahatchee, Major General Thomas Jessup petitioned the U.S. government to end the war and move the Seminoles to the Everglades. Unfortunately, this petition was denied. Fort Jupiter was created. The Seminoles were imprisoned at Fort Jupiter, which is today Pinnock Landing. The fort itself is no longer standing. The Seminoles were then transported to a reservation in Oklahoma. The Jupiter Lighthouse was completed in 1860. It is the oldest structure in Palm Beach County. At the time, it cost $60,000, and it can be seen 20 miles offshore. It stands on a mound 48 feet above sea level, and the lighthouse itself stands 108 feet tall. If you have been to Jupiter, it's likely that you've heard of the Carlin family. In 1871, Charles Carlin was the assistant lighthouse keeper, and then his family moved north for a few years, but when they returned, he became known as Captain Carlin, and he commanded the U.S. Life-Saving Station at Jupiter Inlet. In 1887, the family completed the first private residence built in Jupiter, which I have a picture of in the top right. There are still some pioneer homes standing today. The Tyndall House is the oldest home in Palm Beach County. It was built in 1892, and it's located just off of Center Street in Jupiter. In 1898, the Du Bois House was built on top of an Indian shell mound on the south side of the inlet. If you see this house today, you can tell that it really is on an Indian shell mound. It's quite obvious that it's not natural. The hurricane of 1928 was known as the storm of the century. It was a Category 4 that hit Jupiter September 16th, 1928. An interesting fact I learned was the lighthouse weighed 17 inches. And primary accounts stated that furniture floated in living rooms and residents rode boats on Center Street. It cost $26.2 million in damage and ended the real estate boom. Ironically, $26.2 million is how much a house costs today on Jupiter Island. So the inlet was first shown on maps in 1671, and then when the Port St. Lucie Inlet was built a few miles north, it changed the hydrodynamics of Jupiter Inlet, so the inlet itself moved 1,250 feet north. And so the U.S. Life-Saving Station still stands where it was before the inlet moved, and that explains the discrepancy of why it's so far from the inlet. So in 1922, entrance jetties were built 400 feet in length and 400 feet apart, and plenty of additions and changes were made throughout these years, but what we see today was built between 1997 and 1998. The jetties were elevated 2 feet, and the southern jetty extended 200 feet with a southeastern tip. Cement was added and a pedestrian walkway, so today you are able to see plenty of fishermen enjoying Jupiter Inlet. Some interesting facts I learned about the inlet. It went through phases of opening and closing. So residents would actually need to bring their shovels and shovel a channel for the Loxahatchee River to empty back into the Atlantic Ocean. And when the inlet naturally closed in 1942, it was decided to just leave it closed because of World War II and the threat of German U-boats. Now, these are 2 pictures I found of Jupiter Island about 100 years apart. You can see that Jupiter Island is just a little sliver of land in the left picture. You can see Cato's Bridge in both of them. And on the right, you can see what it is today, which I think is pretty amazing. All right, thank you all so much, and have a great day or night.